Hello and welcome to another Hollywood Wargaming Bolt Action Top Vehicle List Review. And today we're going to be looking at the top 5 vehicles for the Italian faction. Now, the Italians were very unique in the Second World War because unlike many other nations in Europe, they did not rely on other countries for most of their armaments. Mussolini's regime definitely focused on self-reliance, which in turn led to them pioneering their own tank doctrine, and did end up designing and producing their own military vehicles. However, at the time, Italy was a mostly agrarian state, which was somewhat lacking behind other nations in terms of industrialization, especially when it came to the automotive industry and just car ownership amongst the general public, meaning the climate of Italy at the time was one that was just very lacking in mechanically inclined individuals. So with that context in mind, it's no real surprise that most Italian armored vehicles that came out were a little subpar to say the least. I mean, let's be honest, there's all these post-war myths about, the Sherman being a death trap or the Tiger being the greatest tank ever, and we can go back and forth on the Panther's reliability all day. But I don't think anyone's gonna contest the statement when I say that Italian tanks were pretty rubbish. Both the Germans and the British had extensive experience using the Italian tanks in the North African theater, and neither of them had very good things to say about it. And that's gonna ring a little bit true in Bolt Action, even though the rule sets in this game aren't particularly historically accurate. You're gonna see certain features of interwar period tanks and early war period tanks show up on a lot of the Italian vehicles that are gonna make them less than desirable. And to sum it up, a lot of the options you're going to have for the Italian tanks are going to consist of things like light anti-tank guns, armor values ranging from 7 to 8, and the vulnerable keyword that's going to show up in a lot of the tanks due to their riveted construction style. On top of that, you have the Samavanta line that's going to consist of a lot of open-top vehicles, which is just a pretty undesirable trait, one that doesn't scale well with Bolt Action's point system. So because of this list is only going to consist of 5 vehicles. And honestly, if you're looking to get into the Italian faction, definitely don't do it for their tanks. That being said, in Bolt Action, you usually only have one tank in a traditional list, and while Italy may be gimped on tanks, they do have some decent armored cars, which take up another platoon slot and often act as a great support vehicle to buffer your tanks and your infantry. But with no further ado, let's jump in and look at our number 5 on our top 5 Italian vehicles. And first up here, we are going to have the flamethrower variant of the L335 Tankette. Now, these guys made up a huge portion of Italy's armored units going into the war, and they equipped them with a ton of different types of weapons. And while there are other solid upgrades to equip on the L3 Tankette, such as the twin machine guns, I think the Flame variant is one that is going to come in respectfully in its own place at number 5. And here you are going to be getting a light tankette with an armor value of 7, sporting a forward-facing hull-mounted flamethrower, and it also is going to be equipped with the slow special rule. It is also going to suffer from the Flame vehicle special rule in the main rulebook, where it is going to be more susceptible to being destroyed by catching fire. And I gotta say, I kind of really disagree with some of the drawbacks that this tank has. The slow special rule seems a little disingenuous. I've seen videos of these things just zipping around, and granted they might be on test fields that have better traction, but the L3 Tankette just does not seem like a vehicle worthy of the slow keyword, even with the flamethrower attached to it. And also, the L3 Tankette with the flamethrower does have a fuel trailer attached behind it. It's way too tiny to carry the fuel within its own chassis. And because of that, I think it should have the external fuel trailer special rule that the Churchill Crocodile has, rather than suffering from the combustible special rule that most other Flame vehicles have from having their napalm fluid stored within the tank. But I don't know, I could be wrong, there could be reasons they wanted to include these keywords, but either way, they're on the tank now, and I don't think that stops it from being viable. And at just 95 points, you are getting an armored chassis that is going to sport that vehicle flamethrower. The slow special rule is definitely a drawback on a vehicle that has a weapon with such short range. But really, if you think about it, you are moving at the same speed of an infantry squad, and your weapon is going to be double the range of the traditional flamethrower. So if you're looking for that sort of infantry supplement for a flamethrower unit, this is actually not a bad option here. It's not exactly durable at just 7 armor value, but in an early mid-war game, it might be enough to keep it alive more so than a squad of 2 men. And at just 30 points more than a veteran unit's, I think that's something to consider. It's also worth noting that flamethrowers are incredibly versatile and useful weapons in bolt action, and if your dice are kind to you, you will be removing a lot of infantry models from the battlefield regardless of how much actual damage you do to the units, as the flamethrower forces a morale check after applying D3 pins. It's pretty unforgiving and really does layer on the hurt on enemy units. It's also worth noting that it has a base penetration value of 3, but always counts as targeting the top armor of a vehicle, which will give it an extra penetration value on most targets, and if you are targeting an open-topped vehicle, it will bump it up yet another penetration value, meaning you will be hitting most vehicles with a penetration value of 4, equivalent to a light anti-tank gun, and on open-topped vehicles with a value of 5, equivalent to a medium anti-tank gun. And that versatility is something that really goes a long way in your armored slot in a generic reinforced platoon. And if you're looking to run an infantry-heavy list in a 1,000-point game, having an armored flamethrower vehicle to back them up might be a viable strategy. However, the main reason this vehicle makes it in a number 5 on this list is because it is a 95-point armored flamethrower chassis. It's very rudimentary, and I don't really see it being something that you're going to take every game. And that brings us along to our number 4 vehicle on the list, and that is going to be the M1139 medium tank. And this is essentially the predecessor to the M1340 tank that is the iconic Italian medium tank of World War II. And really the main difference here is that you're going to have a hull-mounted anti-tank gun with a turret-mounted twin medium machine guns, while the later variant of the Italian tanks realized that they needed that traversing main anti-tank gun. But this falls into that funny category that I mention every now and then in videos, where sometimes interwar period designs shine over actual real-world effective designs, and in bolt action, having those machine gun turrets while your main weapon is mounted to the hull is actually kind of beneficial, because you're always going to want your best armor value facing the enemy vehicle, which is of course your frontal armor, and that leaves your machine gun turrets free to engage any enemy infantry that may be nearby, who you feel may need some extra pins on them. And that line of logic is exactly why the M1139 is coming in on this list rather than the M1340. And at 130 points, you are going to be getting a light tank armor value of 8, with a hull-mounted light anti-tank gun with a penetration value of 4, and sporting 2 medium machine guns inside the turret. However, this tank is going to have the vulnerable keyword due to its riveted construction, meaning that armor value is going to drop down significantly when you're hit on the side and rear. And a light tank with light anti-tank gun is usually something I would recommend avoiding in bolt action, as they're not very durable and they don't really pack much of a punch, which tends to be lackluster at 100 plus points. But you do have that dual MMG turrets, and that's going to make this vehicle a somewhat respectable mobile pillbox. As I always say, going from that 7 plus armored profile to 8 is a huge jump in durability, and even if you don't have an armored target to fire that light anti-tank gun on, you can always fire it as a 2-inch high explosive. Something I usually wouldn't recommend doing, but at just 130 points, having a light mortar and 2 medium machine guns fire off at a squad is a pretty respectable amount of firepower. That being said, this is overall a relatively affordable, though somewhat fragile vehicle that is going to be versatile on the battlefield and be able to engage a lot of soft armored vehicles along with infantry units. Now, it is also worth recommending the M1340 here, because the M1340 is going to get a coaxial machine gun, meaning you will be able to throw 15 shots at enemy infantry units should you need to, rather than fire that 2-inch high explosive rounds. However, it is worth noting that the M1340 is going to have the slow special rule, making it 5 points cheaper, which I would recommend avoiding if you can. But both of these vehicles are going to be able to take a pintle-mounted medium machine gun for plus 15 points. And I think that is quite a respectable upgrade on such a cheap vehicle. But it is worth noting that that is going to make you open-topped every time you fire it, something that I am very much not a fan of and kind of feel like it detracts from that 15-point value. But while we're on the topic of medium machine guns, we'll move along to our number 3 vehicle, and that's going to be the AUTOBLINDA 40. And at just 90 points, you're going to be getting an armored car with an armored value of 7, with 2 turret-mounted medium machine guns, sporting the Recce special rule, also with dual direction steering. So while I don't think this is a full-blown infantry supplement vehicle, it is a very good rapid response medium machine gun platform, one that's not only going to fit right at home in that armored car slot in your reinforced platoon, but also be highly maneuverable and survivable with that recce and dual direction steering keyword. Both of those keywords play really well off of each other, and if you're a more cunning commander, you're going to be able to make use of that to juke your enemies out on a lot of occasions. And this is pretty straightforward. It's just a nice, reliable armored car that's going to be sporting a decent amount of small arms firepower and is going to be able to maneuver around the battlefield very quickly to engage the enemies that it needs to. Exactly the role that armored car slot needs to fill. However, I will throw out an honorable mention and maybe even somewhat of a tie here with the AUTOBLINDA 40, and that's going to be the L35 Tankette with a dual machine gun mounts. And at just 70 points, you're going to be getting a tankette with an armor value of 7, sporting 2 hull-mounted medium machine guns. It's a pretty crude little tankette, but very affordable, and definitely a solid infantry supplement. And if you pile the AUTOBLINDA 40 on top of the L3 tankettes, you're basically going to have 2 mobile pillboxes sporting 2 machine guns each, all for just 160 points. It's a pretty good combo if you just plan on ignoring your enemy's vehicles and going for the objectives in playing a more infantry-oriented list. That being said, I am very much a fan of the recce special rule and wheeled vehicles in bolt action. I highly appreciate their extra mobility, and because of that, I am going to recommend the AUTOBLINDA 40 over the L3 Tankette with the medium machine guns, even if it does cost 20 points more. But at number 2, following up the AUTOBLINDA 40, we have the AUTOBLINDA 41. And this here is going to be more or less your basic armor car, mirroring the Humber for the British or the 8-Rad for the Germans. It is a 105-point vehicle with the armored car value of 7, sporting a light autocannon in the turret with that 2-shot, 1-inch high explosive templates, but also sports the dual direction steering and recce special rule as previously mentioned. And as you all know, I am a big fan of the light autocannon as you are getting more shots, which is going to help improve your chances to hit in a game where hit modifiers are key. And much like the other armored cars for other factions I've championed, having that light autocannon on this wheeled vehicle armored chassis is a great middle ground between your infantry and your armored units, and really plays as a great supporting unit for both. Really, they're just all around solid, versatile, and take up a relatively uncontested slot in your reinforced platoon. It's also worth mentioning that both of the AUTOBLINDAs, both the 41 and the 40 variants, have a rear-facing hull medium machine gun, something that probably isn't going to be coming into play a lot of times, but with dual direction steering, you never know. If you're feeling bold, you could enter battle ass backwards. They can also both be upgraded with a pintle-mounted medium machine gun for 15 points. And this is something that most other armored cars in the game just don't really have an option to do, and I think it's a very welcome option here. While the extra 15 points and the fact that it makes the vehicle become open-topped is a little too much for most tanks in the game, I think it's actually very befitting for armored cars. They are less expensive and they do often need a little bit extra small arms firepower to help them engage their targets. So while I don't think it's a necessity, I think it is a very welcome addition, and I would definitely recommend trying running out both the AUTOBLINDA 40 and 41 with that pintle-mounted medium machine gun. Especially on that AUTOBLINDA 41, as you are only going to be having that autocannon firing off most of the time. And the extra shots are very much going to be welcome on that vehicle. And lastly, coming in at number 1 for the Italian faction, and this one is kind of shockingly good, we have the M1542, and at just 145 points, you're going to be getting a light tank chassis with a turret light anti-tank gun, but it's going to be sporting 2 coaxial medium machine guns and 2 hull-mounted medium machine guns. That means for just 145 points, you are going to be having a light tank with an armor value of 8, firing off 20 medium machine gun rounds each turn. And that is basically the bona fide definition of an infantry supplement. As the final evolution of the M1340 line, you are not getting the vulnerable keyword here. It is a respectably durable vehicle with an armor value of 8, meaning it's not going to be going anywhere to small arms fire, like that of an anti-tank gun or a light autocannon. And even if it does die on, say, turn 4 or 5, it has such a low points overhead that you will likely have made your points back by then. It's by no means going to be able to take on heavy late war tanks, but with that amount of machine guns, it's going to be able to reliably engage enemy infantry, and if it needs to, it can always turn that light anti-tank gun on an enemy vehicle. It's just versatile, relatively durable to its cost, and actually shockingly lethal against infantry and other soft-skinned targets. And to top it all off, you can also upgrade this vehicle with a pintle-mounted medium machine gun, though at that point you will be getting up to 160 points, and making yourself open-topped at that point cost might just be overshooting the moon. So while the Italian tanks might not be the most stellar lineup overall, I think we do have a pretty fantastic vehicle in our number 1 slot here. It's not every day a vehicle has 2 hull-mounted medium machine guns, and it's even rarer to see a vehicle that has 2 coaxial medium machine guns on top of that. It's just a very unique build on top of that light tank with that light anti-tank gun, one that you don't see in other factions, and one that really just shines in the bolt action rule set. And I could see some pretty lethal Italian list, running a reinforced platoon at 1000 points, sporting that M1542, alongside vehicles such as the AUTOBLINDA 40 or 41 backing it up. And I will throw out an honorable mention in this video to the Auto Sahariana, which is basically the Italian equivalent to an LRDG truck. And while I love being able to equip those vehicles with autocannons, light anti-tank guns, and a bunch of machine guns, unfortunately, it's almost never worth it on a soft-skinned vehicle. And while I do plan on buying some myself, I don't think I could fit them into a top 5 list. I also have a lot of love in my heart for the Savante line of vehicles, but they just don't work out in Bolt Action's rule set, namely because they are open-top vehicles, and open-top is a huge drawback on vehicles in this game, one that does not reflect it properly in the points cost. But I want to know what you guys think. Is there any vehicles you think I left out of this list? Are there any decisions you disagree with? As always, explain your logic behind your reasoning, and let me know what experience you've had using Italian vehicles in Bolt Action. I also want to give a special shout out to the user Kingdom of Italy, who has engaged with me both on Reddit and YouTube, and has not only helped give recommendations for this video and inspired me to do my Italian faction review, but also inspired me to continue painting my Italian faction for Bolt Action. I really do want this channel to be one that can engage with the community and act as a sort of resource for them, and I really do appreciate when people reach out to me and give suggestions and information. If it's valid and reasonable, I will take it to heart and incorporate it into this channel, which in turn should cycle back into the community. But if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like, consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this, turn on notifications, and as always, until next time, take care.